Hello, everyone. My name's Aaron Christensen. This is Horror 101 with Dr. AC, celebrating classic horror throughout history with new episodes every Friday night. Tonight, we're discussing The Changeling from 1980, Peter Medak's stellar haunted house tale, which usually takes a back seat to the big-budget envisioning of Stephen King's The Shining, released the same year. But in many ways, this small Canadian film, loaded with creepy atmosphere and tightly fashioned suspense sequences, surpasses the axe-swinging histrionics that Kubrick and Company dish out. As grieving composer John Russell, recovering from the deaths of his wife and daughter, George C. Scott anchors the picture with a compelling strength and vulnerability. Roused by a murdered child's spirit in the Seattle mansion where he has retreated, Russell's utter conviction with which he seeks to uncover the mystery is riveting. There's also the neat subplot of Melyvn Douglas's duplicitous politician, whose backstory proves more and more integral to the house's healing. William Gray and Diana Maddox craft a marvelous script based on musician Russell Hunter's real-life story, and Medak, whose films don't always indicate the most subtle of sensibilities, is absolutely the right man for the job, creating and sustaining incredible tension throughout, as well as delivering marvelous moments of release. The film made a huge smash at the Genie Awards, Canada's version of the Oscars, winning Best Picture, Actor, Actress, Screenplay, Cinematographer, Production Design, and 2 awards for sound, yet has mysteriously not achieved the same mythic status as other classic haunted house stories. But, once experienced, you'll never look at a red rubber ball or antique wheelchair the same way again. And these children that you spit on as they try to change their world, we're talking about Changeling from 1980, celebrating its 45th anniversary, and we have an incredible panel to chat about it with me. Let's bring everybody in, and let's say hello to John Kitley.
Hello, glad to be here.
John W. Bowen.
That was the best Bowie reference so far today.
Beaming in from Brussels, my blood brother Gert Verbeek.
Hello, and nice to meet you all.
Down the way in St. Louis, Aaron Abishan.
Happy to talk about this one.
Beaming in from California, Stephen Peros.
Happy to be here, and in fact, it is a very changeling-like day here in Los Angeles.
And we will be talking about The Changeling from 1980, celebrating its 45th anniversary, and we'll be talking spoilers, so prepare yourselves, everybody. Thanks for coming on the show, and welcome. Stephen, why don't we kick things off with you? What was your immediate attraction to talking about this movie?
I think a lot of people's favorite movies, when you really go back to your favorite, not the movies you think are the greatest films of all time necessarily, but your favorite movies, they seem to always go back to, and I read this somewhere, 14. Well, that's exactly how old I was when I saw The Changeling. I saw it in 1980 in a movie theater, and I really never forgot it. And it's only that the cult of it that has increased. Well warranted. I remember seeing it then, and it wasn't particularly highly regarded. And I remember realizing I'd seen something very special. It was sort of the last serious horror film I'm sure there are exceptions, before horror became very jokey in the 80s. And there's nothing jokey about The Changeling. There's some natural humor. George C. Scott is very engaging in the role, but it stays with you. It stays with you, and it stayed with me 45 years. And when you said, let's do it, I said, oh, for sure, that's the one.
Well, thanks for coming on. Aaron, how about you? How did you come to this film for the first time?
I have no idea how I came to this film for the first time, as is often my answer.
I don't know why I even ask you anymore.
I don't know either, because it's a bad question for me. But I'd rather answer the question that Stephen answered, which is why I was excited to be here. And that's because I honestly think that this is one of those, and as Stephen, you mentioned, this is a film that has gained a cult following, but I think this should be every bit as big as The Exorcist, every bit as big as the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. To me, it is a quintessential horror film, the most important haunted house film. I think that there's a whole untapped subgenre to talk about family horror. And this is, again, standing at the very top of the pyramid of what I think of as the most important family horror films. And horror is often about grief. And I think if you want to point to an example of a film that most effectively deals with grief, you couldn't possibly point to a better film than The Changeling.
Nice. Gert, how about you? Do you remember when you came to this film for the first time?
Yes, it was post 2000 for me. And it was around the era that there were like a lot of internet forum message boards, active. And it was a place where you could get recommendations. And I had always had interest in ghost stories and the likes. And this title kept, popping up with people recommending it. And I was like, I missed this somehow during TV broadcasts or cable television or rental. And that's how I came to watch it, because I did get the DVD shortly after. And yeah, I'll just join you right away. Already, my first impression was like, whoa, this is one of the last really classic ghost stories, haunted house films for me. Before the 80s got, let's just say, the 80s, we were entering the Ghostbusters area. So,
And I know you have a great love for those 80s movies, so it's not like, one or the other, but yeah, this one definitely is of a different stripe.
I can add that I did see Ghost Story from 1981.
81, yeah.
Which is also one of those last two classic ones. And you could feel the 80s already coming up with the special effects and all that. So to me, those two, they would even make a great double bill if you want the last classic ones before the genre started to change.
And it would be a Melyvn Douglas double bill.
Absolutely.
John Bowen, how about you? How'd you come to the film for the first time?
I'm going to pull an Aaron Aubuchon on you here. Normally, I'm the guy who can tell you, well, it was intermittently overcast and my friends I was with and where we saw it and everything. I have absolutely no recollection of what my first time around with The Changeling really was. I'm gonna say probably on VHS. I'm pretty sure I didn't see it in the theater. But addressing something both Stephen and Garrett brought up there about the 80s beginning to get very jokey. I'm very much on board with you about that. But also even I found even then the films that weren't jokey, they still were going into this very comic booky kind of feeling, everything very sort of overlit, and this one is definitely it just feels like it's from a different time. My tastes in horror are pretty small scene Catholic, but I do have a marked fondness for haunted houses, and I cast the net pretty wide there because of course I count things like Salem's Lot, for instance. And also the fact, it's very much sort of, you've got an A-list star without ever getting overly serious. It treats its subject with a bit more gravity, I think, than a lot of things of that period.
And John, how about you?
I did not see this in the theater when it came out, but I saw it on VHS pretty much when it came out there. I'm a sucker for ghost stories, classic ghost stories that has a mystery to be solved and all that. And I think this is one of the best examples of that. It's not action packed, but man, that story is amazing. And George C. Scott pretty much carries the film. And it is about grief. And I think he does an exceptional job showing how that can affect people differently, and the struggle through there. And that the house picks up on that and uses him to solve the mystery, so to speak. And I think it's creepy as hell. And it is, it's one of my probably top 5 of classic ghost stories. I love this film.
As you alluded, Aaron, like it just doesn't get a whole lot of attention in the way that you would think it would. I mean, The Shining came out the same year, and I would say The Shining gets all the press when it comes to 1980 haunted house movies. But The Changeling, I mean, just from that opening scene, you kind of know you're in for a different kind of movie. Like that emotional weight of that first pre-credit sequence is just devastating. And then you go, okay, this is where we're going. This level of pain is what we're going to be exploring. But it's also a quintessential Canadian film. It's not a prom night. It's not a terror train. It's something different, but it still feels very Canadian, even with its American star.
Maybe we can comment on that opening scene because that packs a punch. And around that time, there were films coming out like Don't Look Now, On a smaller scale, there was Voices. If anybody knows that British made-for-TV film, and Full Circle, for instance.
Oh, right, Haunting of Julia. Yeah.
Julia. They all start with this like tragic event, couples or parents losing their children, and that already puts you in a place like a heavy emotional place with the main character. And then the other thing is like how it is done in The Changeling. That car crash scene is like, if you want to open your film with a punch and grab your audience, that's how it's done. And years later, they're still doing it. Like recent films like Megan has the same approach, the child losing the parents. Neil Marshall in The Descent does the same thing. I mean, if that's not a testament to how to do it right, then I don't know what it is.
And you know, you also talk about how it pulls you into a mood. One of the things that is to be celebrated and a little bit tragic is how effective. And once I actually hit mute on everything that happens after the that car crash, and I realized how important Rick Wilkins' score is to this movie, to all those transitions, to setting the mood and the tone for this film. It is such a rich score, being both frightening, being both filled with grief and remorse, and yet it's literally one of maybe 2 scores this man did. I don't understand how after The Changeling, his next theatrical credit was orchestrator on Millennium, which is a guilty pleasure for me. But I mean, that score is a masterwork. It's truly a masterwork.
Yeah, my wife and I, like, whenever we see like a really great performance and we don't see a lot of other film credits or TV credits, we're like, well, maybe they're doing a lot of stage work, you know?
Right.
And in this case, I'm like, I don't know what else Rick Williams is doing.
Yeah, he did some television around that time. I was looking him up this morning because I knew I wanted to mention him in tribute. And I had a sneaking suspicion, like I forget the name of the gentleman who did the score for Creepshow, which is a film that could not exist without that amazing score. And it's same thing, very, very little film work besides this film. Right. He may have, for all I know, he may have created wonderful orchestral works and, you know, worked with a symphony for the rest of his life. I have no idea.
Yeah, a couple of things I wanted to touch on there. Well, first about that opening scene, that's a great example where the lack of score works really well, especially when you consider how important it is to the rest of the film. The music is to the rest of the film. Because I revisited this a couple of nights ago because I do my homework for these things. I really do, honestly. And it was the first time, or I mean, maybe I'd noticed it before, but the first time it really stuck with me was in the aftermath of that accident. It's all the other sound. It's everything else dying down, and the last thing you hear as that dump truck finally comes to a stop is the dump truck engine just sort of idling and then quitting, just as their lives are quitting as well, which I thought was a fantastically judicious choice. Again, because music is such a huge part of the rest of it, and then just using absolute dead silence there was very smart. Also about the score, I was noticing that as well, like going, why is this guy's name completely unfamiliar to me when I was just watching the credits, and also the music box theme that he uses for that is I thought it was a good choice on somebody's part to dig, because that's a very Brahms sounding theme. Famously sounds like Brahms' Lullaby, but there's another piano piece of his that sounds even more like that one that they don't. But they use his music elsewhere, like the brief bit of Kazuyoshi Akiyama conducting. That's actually the Vancouver Symphony. It's supposed to be Seattle. They pick up playing what George C. Scott is playing on the piano. That's the end of Brahms' First Symphony, and then there's the bit with the chamber music, which is also a piano quintet by Brahms as well. So I thought it was just kind of a cool little like attention to detail that somebody was making, whether it was the director or who it was that decided that.
I've always liked when a score is incorporated into the film itself. I mean, they did that in Horror Express and Fulci's the Psychic, and they do it here where it's something he's playing, but it's part of the score that's used throughout, but it ties in with the storyline. And I've always found that very interesting, the different ways that they incorporate that into different films.
Yeah, Howard Blake is responsible for our music box theme. That was in early on because they knew they had to build things around that. Our music arranger and music editor, Ken Wanberg, and he would go on to work with Spielberg on pretty much everything alongside John Williams. So as you said, you know, the music is so key to this film. George C. Scott playing a composer. It plays with melody in a very specific way, in that it is trying to kind of lure you in. But as you mentioned, John Bowen, like the sound is also equally important. Like we have George C. Scott having the pounding.
A lot of his best moments involve him being this very hard granitic person who suddenly crumbles. If you look at, especially things he's done since then. I mean, he was a great Scrooge.
Yeah.
He was fantastic as Scrooge. Look at him in Exorcist 3. There's a whole lot of that. You know, this where he's playing that, well, not really a cartoonishly tough cop, but just a very, very cynical detective whose very vulnerable side gets brought out several times. And he's done Hardcore, which is not really a great film, but he does the same thing there. So he was kind of perfect for this too, because we're really he goes from stoic to just completely crumbling, and like he's got a great ability to do that in just a nanosecond, which a lot of other actors, I think, like even a lot of really great actors would have a hard time.
Well, on the subject of the actors, Melyvn Douglas, while he doesn't have a lot, and it's kind of, to John's point, he's a very gruff, old, you know, no emotions. He's just doing this, and he's very stern. But at the very ending, whether he knew or remembers what happened, I think it had been in his brain that I am the son. So you get to believe that, and it starts to crack at that very end. And then you see the realization of, oh, fuck. and he gets very emotional. And it's really similar to Scott, where all the emotions are pushed down, but then he breaks at the end, and he yells something about, don't you defame my father was a great man, even though he's starting to realize that he had murdered his real son. And again, I think it's a great performance that you just see Melyvn just shine at the end during that really intense scene. I think that's beautiful.
And the simplicity of the filmmaking there kind of recalls Robert Wise in The Haunting. It's just a bunch of grips, off camera, shaking the table, and the thing, and Melyvn Douglas sells it. He sells it so well. I mean, it's a beautiful.
I will say, and I have to quote my me and Aaron's co-host Damien, because when we talked about this on our podcast, as much as terrifying as that ball is, that fucking wheelchair. When that thing spins around, now I watched it last night, and I've seen it I don't know how many times. It's happening. God damn, is that effective? Because all of a sudden that we've seen the chair before in multiple scenes, and all of a sudden that thing just screeches to the side, and the way they shoot it, where Trish is in the front, and you just see the chair turn in the corner right behind her, and you're like, God damn. So very effective.
And then it's like chasing her down the hall. And I mean, that's the scene that is and all the way down the stairs. I love that scene. And it's funny, it is the movie that you talk about with the ball, but the chair is right there on the poster. It is like this iconic piece of the film. And we don't talk about it. I do want to circle back really quick to Melyvn Douglas, though, because this is something my wife and I were talking about, is how much do we think that character did know what was happening? And does he deserve his fate? What is it that Joseph actually wants from, from the uncovering of this mystery, because Joseph Carmichael, Melyvn Douglas' character, he's toward the end of his life. I mean, he's certainly still thriving as a politician, but he's an old man. And so I do wonder what it is that Joseph is looking for, the murdered child. And, again, how guilty is Joseph Carmichael?
Well, this film is packed with metaphors, I think. The return of the repressed, I think, is in there. Certainly, the Joseph Carmichael's character seems to be the sins of the fathers concept visited upon the sons. Not to go off of your point, but I would love to talk about the fact that we have to dig into the earth, that this idea that grief means that we have to examine things beneath the veneer of our society and get down into the dirt and the bones of things before we can uncover the truth. So I think that they're always dealing with implicit messaging here. And it seems to me that his character's arc is, first of all, one thing that I love about this movie is, if you think George C. Scott's the only one experiencing grief in the movie, wait till the end. But because it's multidimensional grief, right? But I don't know what his character wants, but it does seem to be a metaphor for this idea of repression, this idea of sins of the fathers, and this idea of ultimately people wanting truth to come out whenever confronted with the possibility of continuing to live a very comfortable lie or deciding to go ahead and confront the truth.
A ghost is just a ghost of a human, and a human is flawed. And my feeling is there's that saying that you die twice, of the flesh, and then the last time someone says your name. And there's something about acknowledgement. It just that I lived, I existed, I had a role to play, and whatever the outcome of how I'm pushing George C. Scott, I demand acknowledgement. And that and I think then how does that pivot Scott? How does Scott pivot Melyvn Douglas? What does Melyvn Douglas do with that information? And that's what and I think the mystery of it, the not clean cut, the messiness of it, I think is part of the film's power as well.
Yeah, and Aaron also mentioned a couple of keywords that are so important, like truth. And the boy also, like Steven said, wanting acknowledgement, but there's also this bigger thing going on or beneath it, because it's so layered and it goes back so many decades, like greed. There is this the boy is being murdered because there was an empire to be inherited, wealth and greed, and that's a real illness of many family fortunes and people in power positions. And I think also it's bigger than just the boy. He wanted to, it's something to be brought to light underneath the many layers.
I don't think it's any mistake that Joseph decides, to Gert's point, to burn down the house. Like, this is wealth that is undeserved. He wants to just destroy it all. I really liked your point, though, Stephen, like that it is messy. Like, it isn't kind of a clean cut, well, you need to do A, B, C, and then the curse is lifted. It's like, there is no easy answer, much in the way of dealing with grief. There is no easy way out. You just have to go through it.
I guess a thing to bear in mind here also is that generationally speaking, this is still very much a post-Watergate thing. So the theme of the corrupt politician is still, that's very much that makes it a child of its time. But Melyvn Douglas's character also, I like that his arc is his emotional arc is a lot more ambiguous, and that we're left with some real questions about what he's feeling. What we know for certain is he's upset as fuck by all of this. There's no getting around that. It's quite conceivable, that he never knows entirely what he's feeling. Maybe he's just incredibly conflicted about the whole thing. And I think that's well illustrated in the fact that at the end, he's in his office, but he's also climbing the stairs up into this burning house. That illustrated it really well.
I think he plays it, and particularly when he's yelling back at George C. Scott and his voice shakes, I think he plays it. There's some backstory he was playing that somewhere in his long life, he had heard this, or someone had said it to him, or it was hinted and he buried it literally and figuratively. Because it doesn't he's not totally shocked at some there's something that hints at something that Melyvn Douglas, decided to put into his memory bank. It's not literally on the page, to say, you won't talk that way about my father. He was a good man. Like that, he's trying to convince you because he knows he wasn't, for whatever data he received somewhere in his life.
Well, I think he knows that, he was adopted.
Mm-hmm.
He was an orphan. So he knows that he's not Joseph Carmichael.
Yeah.
He knows that he is taking on that role. And I think that is a secret he has been carrying. Now, whether he knows that his father murdered his original son or not, I don't know. I get the sense that maybe not, because that's what's shown to him when he goes up the stairs and sees the vision of the father drowning the son. But he absolutely knows that he's not the original Joseph Carmichael, and that there was a ruse, there was a trick being played on the public.
That's one of the things that I love about these panels, is because with all the conversation, it triggers things in my head where I'm going, oh shit, I didn't think about that. So to the point of whether Melyvn Douglas knew, usually in a ghost story, and I think maybe Aaron pointed it out, whatever the force is, it wants the truth to be out. So George C. Scott discovers the truth, but he does not send it to the papers. He does not let it out. He gives it to Melyvn Douglas's character. Here's the information. I've done what I had to do. And then it's either the young Joseph is after his replacement, which is why he goes back at the end. You see him in the house. Or when he is all said and done and George C. Scott goes back to the house and the young Joseph goes, that's not what I wanted. I wanted it to be known, and then sets the house on fire and starts attacking people. So it is an interesting way to look at what exactly the ghost wanted. Was he out for the senator right from the beginning because you stole my life? Because he can't go after his father, obviously. But then you would think that, okay, he did all that, then why destroy the house?
Right.
Because I do think at some point he wanted the truth to be known.
Well, and also it's important to remember this is a 9-year-old kid. He doesn't have adult emotions and thought process. He just wants to hurt because he's been hurt.
It's actually a line in the script spoken by George C. Scott, what John just said. Like at some point he shouts at the ghost of the boy somewhere upstairs, like, what is it that you want?
What do you want from me?
Yeah. And then he goes to do his own thing, what he thinks he needs to do, which is go visit Melyvn Douglas there. So
I had no idea this was based on a true story. The whole Cheeseman estate in Denver. I'm watching the extras and going, wait, what? Like, this feels like such an outrageous, great conceived ghost story. But yeah, Russell Hunter, who is credited with the story here, he went through what we see George C. Scott's character go through, where he's in the house and he's hearing banging and he goes and uncovers things. And, there was a person who had murdered his son and replaced him. I'm like, what? So yeah, I highly recommend the Severin disc because of the commentary, because of the extras. Also just the great being able to see this film in its glory. And I do want to talk about some of the tech here because the cinematography by John Coquillian is so beautiful. It's so rich. It does call to mind kind of that Godfather feel where there's just a richness to all the texture. But we talked a little bit about the music, but other aspects of the art direction and Peter Medak's direction in particular.
I think he does, much like someone mentioned Robert Wise's The Haunting before. It's almost very, very similar, where without showing the typical trappings of a haunted house, it's just these long pans through this house, and maybe with a little atmospheric noise or the curtains blowing, it gives you that setting of a creepy ass haunted house, even though we don't see you're not in the Addams Family house or the Munsters. It's just this big, huge mansion, but you get that feeling of almost claustrophobia, where you're like, this is like really heavy in here.
Yeah.
even though it's a big house, it still feels claustrophobic. But I think it's a testament to the tension building, the atmosphere, with the cinematography and the faded colors, the lighting. There are some scenes that you may wonder, like, how do they do is when the camera floats through the rooms, because at the time, Steadicam was just coming on.
Just coming on, yeah.
But they were still that was heavy equipment. So most of these movements they were doing like with traveling shots on rails. But you don't think about that now if you see movies, because nowadays the technology is different. They have different equipment. Like travel shots can be done with a rickshaw, like a thing where cinematographer is sitting on, the cameraman is sitting on, and it gets pulled and pushed. But that thing didn't come into play as a equipment until like 2010 or something. But you just don't wonder how they did it. And then apparently the rails where the cameras were sliding on were painted in the same color as the floorboards or the carpet. Sometimes they had to like pull it back, and production assistants were like pulling the carpets back in order when they come into frame. It's like, this was the 70s, and you don't question now how much work it entailed for building the sets, figuring out the shots. I mean, it's a testament also to Peter Medak, how he preconceived all these shots and scenes before executing them with the whole crew.
A guy posted this on my Facebook page because I mentioned it. I put up a thing about watching, revisiting The Changeling to prepare for this. Okay, and he wrote this on my page, so it's not that big. It says, I used to live 2 blocks from the house in Denver where this supposedly took place. Weirdly personal story. They tore it down to build a high-rise. One night many years ago, I went home with a girl and she lived there. I geeked out about it so much that she told me to leave. Basically, he got cock blocked by the roots of the changeling somehow.
That's right.
Read the room, man. Come on.
Come on, who else here wouldn't have done the same thing?
I was about to say it's probably not an isolated incident.
Yeah.
Other thoughts on the cinematography, Trevor Williams' production design. Much like The Shining, the outdoor does not match the indoor, but in this case, the outdoor facade is also artificial. It was built in front of another structure. But then once we get inside, it's all sets, and boy, what a beautiful set it is.
That's when you geek out and you're showing this film to someone for the first time, and you inevitably always say, that's not real. That's not a real house. They built it. So
and they build it because they're gonna burn it. They're gonna burn it down.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that Trevor Williams is the great unsung hero of this film. I mean, Medak is the one that we talk about most. But man, this film wouldn't be what it is because, as they talk about in the commentary, the house is a character in the film, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's by design. The reason that stairway is the way that it is because they talked about it early on. And Medak, one of the first shots we see after George C. Scott first walks into the house is that shot that we'll see over and over again throughout the film, where we're at the very top of the stairway looking down, and that's the ghost's POV, according to Medak. That's establishing the ghost and the house as sort of being synonymous with each other and developing that house as a character. And I just think it's such a incredible testament. They spent $500,000 on the construction of the interior set, and that's about $2 million in today money, just to build the inside of it. And I think that's fascinating that they couldn't find anything that fit the character they had in their head through location scouting. So they were like, well, screw it, we're going to build it. And they said in the soundstage that they were built in, if you've ever been in this film soundstage, they're huge. They're like airplane hangars. They said this set was a 1.5 feet from the ceiling of the soundstage, because it was just so gigantic.
Yeah. Also, Aaron, what you said about the high camera setups, he keeps on using it even in normal scenes where there are conversations, just to pull out of the characters and kind of have this point of view, like they're being watched by some presence. And I mean, it works so well in building up again this tension and atmosphere. And there's more to it when you look at it at the visual narrative.
Probably everybody must be in agreement here. Is that not the mark of a proper haunted house film. The house has to be a character, like the domicile. And I don't get like whether it's this or the Shining or the Velasco house in Legend of Hell House, and another of my favorite haunted house movies, or the one in The Ghost of Mr. Chicken. They all, every last one, it's always the house is a character. Even when you step outside of traditional hauntings, but where there's like a haunted house motif, like in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, or Monroeville Mall. They just, all of them, they have the structure itself has to be a character in the film. Otherwise, you don't have a haunted house film.
Well, and it's funny that like Trevor Williams, he got his start doing Dan Curtis TV productions.
Really?
And if you think about like those Dan Curtis, like all of them have that wonderful Gothic feel on a budget. And so, the idea that like he kind of cut his teeth there and then went on to do this. He also did like all the Police Academy movies. As I was looking through his filmography, I'm like, that is a very diverse CV, my friend.
Well, I do, when you say Dan Curtis, I think this and Burnt Offerings are in the same arena. I'm a fan of that one, and whatever one thinks of it, they certainly are in the same subgenre in terms of tone, in terms of family. It's not about grief. It's about one nutty family. That's for sure.
Yeah, familial trauma is writ large.
Yeah. Well, that's right. Oliver Reed does have trauma. That's for sure. He just has trauma just showing up on screen. So.
Well,
but you were going to mention you were going to get to the Séance, and I definitely think would be. I just want to say that there's something about that Séance, and Séances have been in haunted house movies and old dark house movies from the 20s, 30s, and that they figured out a new way to do, and an organically new way to do a Séance, and didn't just lean into the trope. And the choice that the actress made, this whole idea of the writing, the trans, it's almost like you've never seen a Séance scene before in a movie while you're watching that. It's like you're watching Séance for the first time. It's so powerfully done. I think that's one of the other many memorable takeaways of sequences when you watch this movie.
Yeah, agreed. It feels completely original and organic, and those performances are of the two mediums are just great. Like watching her in that trance, but also watching how well they work together. Yeah. Like her husband knows when to pull the paper. He knows that he needs to speak what's written aloud so that it can be recorded. It just feels like something they've done before. It feels 100% authentic.
Yeah, the sound design becomes score. The scribbling faster. How did you and the increase in the repetition of her the male partner increases the intensity.
Yeah, one thing that didn't strike me until I revisited this the other night is mediums there, and maybe this is one reason why it feels reasonably fresh. Is we don't get any kind of backstory for those people. In any other seance scene, you're gonna get the resume of these people, even if they're only just sort of there for that, even if they're like completely utilitarian, they're just there and then gone. But it's like they knew, okay, we've all seen enough haunted house movies to know that the mediums, or later on the parapsychologists, we don't need to be told which scandal sheet they work for or which university they're on the staff of. It's just, okay, here are these people who do this for a living, and that's I think one thing that kept that from falling into being the dangers of all the old cliches. Because the thing is with haunted house movies, you've got like a whole shopping list of cliches, and some of them are going to be unavoidable, and so you got to be really, I think anybody who writes one of these has to be super judicious about, okay, what are all the necessary evils we're going to indulge here, and then keep the rest out. Same thing with the Séance scene, I thought.
I think, and I don't remember the actress who played the actual medium, but I like that it was a different with the automatic writing, because that's, like, to Stephen's point, that's not something that you normally see. But her voice is almost as haunting as what's in the movie, and what she's asking. Did you die in the house? Joseph, and how did you die? Why do you remain? All of this stuff, because they even use that for the poster. But you hear that, you hear her speaking it, and then you hear it on the tape when he's playing it, and she has this calm voice that is just chilling when you hear that in the film. And it's a small part of the film, but man, when he's listening back and then realizes that Joseph is actually answering, it gives you chills. It's really effective.
See, that's also what I liked about the seance scenes. Like, it served more than one purpose. It's not like bring him in, see some supernatural things, bring him out. No, the whole thing gets recorded, and then we get the scene afterwards where George C. Scott is discovering more on the audio. You guys mentioned a couple of scenes already that are like standout scenes. There's also the ball from the stairs and the wheelchair upstairs. Those are more like the bombastic, big scares. But what I also liked is everything leading up to those moments. There's so many subtleties, and it's also like inspired by Medak admits it that he uses like Hitchcock techniques, like seeing stuff in the background move while the main character doesn't see it. It's so many subtleties that are adding up that made the bigger scares just so much more effective, because it's always there. And I think the first thing that we start to see there's something off on this house is when there's a shot of the piano alone and just one note goes ping. And as of then, it's like regularly these little things happen. And there's also, how all these elements come together is just like really so fine-tuned. There's the one scene where he finally, for the first time, discovers the way up to the attic. Yeah. First, he needs to break down a board, and then he does this 3-beat thing. Like, first he needs to, there's a lock of iron, an iron lock that he needs to break, and he does it in 3 hits, but then the door is still locked, and he goes for those same 3 hits with his shoulder, but the third time the thing just opens. So it's like Medak really knows what he's doing in playing with our expectations, so that and he gets us. So
yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. That is one of my favorites. It's like boom, boom, and you feel the weight of George C. Scott against that door, so it's a sturdy door. And then for it to just open, I want to circle back to a scene that Aaron Abishan mentioned: the digging through the floorboards of the house to find the unmarked grave of Joseph. That is preceded by that little girl's vision of, and I think that's another amazingly scary and eerie scene as well. But I will throw the proverbial ball to you, Aaron, if you want to talk a little bit about that scene.
That scene to me is pivotal for the sort of implicit message of what's going on in the film, right? Like, it's not until we actually dig down deep that we actually can uncover. Like, it's as long as we're maintaining this sort of surface level examination of everything that's going on, we're not going to get to the crux of the matter. And it's not until we actually dig down that we find out the most critical clues to move forward and make the plot continue to roll on.
Well, and what's interesting is, I don't know if any of you have had this experience, but I've seen this film regularly over 45 years, but gaps in between, and it speaks to the power of that haunted house and everything in that haunted house, that every time he goes to away from it to that mother, that child's bed, I'm like, oh right, that happens in this movie too. Like I forgot about that part.
Right.
That's even though it's incredibly powerful, this idea, and then the next thing you know, blink and there's a hole in the middle of this poor child's bedroom, and there's George C. Scott down there digging. It's like this ice. It fits into the hole, of course, but it's this strange little detour you didn't see coming. That you didn't think a haunted house would leave the haunted house for a powerful ghost sequence.
It does. You talk about that. I think that's really important to mention too. It's like part of what we're talking about here is grief, but we're also talking about sort of like the disruption of the family, right? And that's what the haunted house becomes a metaphor for. And so we can't really do it in the haunted house, so we have to do it at somebody else's house. But is there anything more sacrosanct than a little girl's bedroom in the sort of mythology of family? And it just gets destroyed. I mean, we really go down to the grossest thing we could possibly turn it into.
Well,
There's
there's
that great shot of overhead, the bedroom,
The levels, yeah.
looking down and seeing George C. Scott at the bottom of the well from above. I thought was really, really
Which
nice.
kind of mirrors what we see in the house, right? We
Yep.
got the different levels there as well. And of course, my first thought was everybody who's a fan of The Ring needs to come back to this movie and be like, oh, wait a minute. It's not as original an idea as we thought.
Well, there's two little things about one thing that Aaron said, how you explained it. It's also like it's so evident when you go through that movie. Like halfway, you kind of have a lot of clues, and you think like, it's like this more or less. But then the film, still has like 40 minutes to go, and like, the whole mystery is so layered, and you have to go so deep, like literally dig so deep in that well, in that little girl's bedroom, and go back so many decades to actually find out what's really going on. That's one thing. And Stephen, what you said, like you watch this film once in a while and you keep discovering things that you've forgotten. It's like the same happened to me. It's not a film that you watch like twice a year, but with some years in between. And then at the end of the ride, you just sit there like, man, this was good. You kind of forgot how good it was because how it fits together and all that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it won, the Canadian version of the Oscar, the Genies. It won 8 Genie Awards, and it was it had a very successful run in Canada, but the U.S. distributor didn't give it the same push. He didn't have the Shining's publicity budget, and so it did not get the same kind of presence in the U.S. And I think some critics were kind of confused by it. I forget who it was. Oh, it was you, Stephen, that said, like Ebert and Siskel were kind of like nonplussed by its both conventional and unconventional approach to a haunted house story.
Well, it was like no win with them. They hated the slashers, and then so here you have this film, and they got problems with George C. Scott. It's just like, why do they even bother reviewing horror films?
Good question.
It's worth pointing out also that maybe one reason it didn't get the push is that Peter Medak otherwise didn't have any kind of track record in horror at all.
Correct. Yeah.
And if you look at what he did since then, I mean, I'm trying to go down the list here. There were they brought him into Mick Garris brought him into Masters of Horror,
right?
Purely on the strength of The Changeling, pretty much. But I mean, other than that, his best known work is probably The Craze, which is a fantastic movie, but you wouldn't necessarily guess that this guy had also made a great horror film.
Well, and The Ruling Class.
The ruling.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And that was his. Yeah.
I mean, the one other notable genre movie they did was Species 2, which I can't say is a great movie, but it's a fun movie.
He did a ghost story during that MOW period. That's from the 70s into the 80s. He did something. Another haunted house movie. It's on YouTube. Some place.
Is it a TV? Because he did
a
fair amount of TV. Well,
yeah. He did one other haunted house movie, which is not nearly as good as The Changeling, but you could certainly see the same director in it. The script I recall, I thought it was one of these great YouTube discoveries I was making. Oh my gosh, another panoramic ghoster! I'm going to watch this, and it was only okay.
Yeah. I noticed he also did a made-for-TV, The Dating Game Killer, which was more, and that was like 2017.
He also did Zorro the Gay Blade, which I
thank you, Aaron,
remember seeing at the drive-in when I was a kid. So
yes, Zorro the Gay. The idea that like Peter Medak did The Changeling, and then the next year he does Zorro the Gay Blade, I was like, which is another wonderful YouTube discovery, folks. Go out and find it because you won't find it in legit release anytime soon.
Well, that's that makes it puts him in that camp where it's very that. Critical journalists largely don't like to talk about these directors who sort of are called in a derogatory manner journeyman directors, and that cheapens the Robert Wises, who excelled, who didn't want to tell the same story, didn't want to always delve into the same arena with each film,
right.
But could really deliver. No matter Robert Wise did some of the most highly regarded musicals and boxing film and
science
and
fiction
horror films.
and
is so they don't get nearly the respect as the Hitchcocks or the Scorseses or the Woody Allens.
Well,
Stephen, I think that movie you were talking about is Cry for Strangers. Cry
Yes.
for the Strangers
Yes.
with
Yeah.
Patrick Duffy, which
Yes.
was co-written by J.D. Fiegelson, who wrote
Dark Knight of the
Dark Knight of the
Scarecrow.
Scarecrow. Yeah.
Yeah.
now you're talking about Peter Medak's other films. It ties back to Aaron's origin story question there. I was aware of Peter Medak as a filmmaker director before I actually watched Changeling post 2000 years. The films that put him on my radar was first The Craze, like John mentioned, but the one that really big time was the film that me and my friends were, talking about was Romeo is Bleeding.
Oh, is that Peter Medak as well?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow.
And that knocked us out of the park, and that's what made me remember his name. Decades later or so, I just got recommended this ghost story, The Changeling. Like, what? Peter Medak? How come I missed that? So that's one thing. And now that you are wondering what all the filmmakers did other in the genre, because Medak is not really regarded as a genre director or horror director, at least. The two producers that he worked most closely with, one was Canadian, I think, Drabinsky,
Stravinsky, yes.
and the other one was from New York. They went on to have like good careers also. But those two producers joined again like in 2006 and made another ghost story in a similar vibe, like more subtle than explicit or boisterous. And it's called Half-Light with Demi Moore. Also, again, it starts with a troubled, grieving, traumatized writer moving into a lighthouse or something, or to the seaside. And again, there's stuff happening in the past that leads to ghostly hauntings.
Well, two names that jumped out to me were our executive producers, Kassar and Vadya, because they would go on to have huge Hollywood careers with the Rambo franchise, working with Paul Verhoeven on Total Recall and Basic Instinct. When I saw their names popped up, I mean, when you think about very diverse careers, you don't think about The Changeling and Basic Instinct and Rambo all in the same breath.
I'd basically forgotten that Garth Drabinsky was a film guy because he's mainly stage producer.
Yeah, Broadway producer, yeah.
I think the other one, Joel Michaels, is the one who got a bit more, because I think he's also involved with Basic Instinct. I don't know.
He
Voilà.
did.
And it's basically those two that work closest with Peter Medak, in terms of getting this production made. And they were also the guys, I think, that at first when they found a location, Medak wasn't really convinced that it would be the best haunted house. So he was ready to leave the project, but I mean, having a flight booked the next day back to London. But during the night, there was this paper being shoved under his hotel door, which said it must have been one of those two guys producing it. Like, look, after careful consideration, we decided we're going to build your facade of the house. you can do it. And I think there's a subtlety there that they were even so respectful that they didn't call him up in the middle of the night. They just had a paper slid under his hotel room because he was sleeping, That was a good thing.
All right, well, let's circle back for final thoughts on The Changeling, celebrating 45 years of scaring the pants off you. John Kitley, let's start with you.
It's an amazing film. Now that we're getting into the Halloween season, this is a perfect film for the whole family for Halloween. Nothing really graphic too much, but it's a great movie, and it'll scare the pants off even the kids. So I would highly recommend this one, especially for this time of year.
It really just does seem like the last 6 or 7 years that grief has really been. I mean, there have been plenty of others in the past, but like, I mean, sure, you can look at, say, Don't Look Now. There's a great example of it, or even Phantasm, with the whole abandonment issues underpinnings of that. But we're seeing so much of that now in movies that we were discussing earlier, and The Changeling really seems to have been ahead of the curve that way, while treading in really familiar territory as well. Just a very familiar haunted house territory. And don't we love that anyway?
Well, I think The Changeling is a a great movie. It's so intricate, well thought out, meticulously made, and by that I mean all the elements that come together: cinematography, the acting, the score. That's what made it for me. Also, if you look what came before and after, one of the last from a great classic line of haunted house ghost story films, because the 80s took all that in a different, more comedic direction. And if you look after that, like Aaron, what you said, there's this notion about The Ring having taken maybe a cue from it. But if we skip the J-horror phase, this particular genre to me did come back, but not until like the early 2000s from a European Spanish wave that
Mhm.
brought us Alejandro Amenábar, the others.
Mhm.
There's The Orphanage, The Beckoning. So it did come back. So it's also a testament to the strength of these kind of movies, that they can be retold and revisited. And The Changeling, like John Kitley also said, is one that should be up there as one of the greatest, in my opinion. Plus, George C. Scott is like, after this film, I had like, give me more George C. Scott, give me. And then I put in The Hospital,
Yeah.
1971, and I got me some. Because
Yeah.
in that movie, is
Yeah.
You
quite
didn't
something else.
you didn't go right to Firestarter?
No, I had to see The Hospital because it's, The Changeling, the gift that keeps on giving. It inspired you to watch other films from other cast and crew involved there. So, great film.
So yeah, I think I'm just echoing what everybody else says. This is one of the great horror films of all time that I don't think gets counted as one of the great horror films of all time. And not only is it great because of how multi-layered it is, how you can, as John kind of mentioned, John Kitley mentioned, you can approach this movie and just watch it as a fun scare movie. You can interpret it on a variety of levels. And you can do everything in different times and different settings. This is a movie that's approachable in a variety of ways. But also, I think its impact is just almost unquestionable. From The Devil's Backbone, The Orphanage, What Lies Beneath, Hereditary. You see the DNA that has been laid by The Changeling in all of these films that have become synonymous with kind of the ghost subgenre in more modern filmmaking. So if you haven't seen The Changeling, go see it for the first time for the love of God. And if you haven't seen it recently, treat yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I think if people
Steven.
are watching this, most of them, the majority will have seen The Changeling. So if you haven't seen it in a while, revisit it and do God's work and introduce someone else to it, because you're going to be wanting to watch horror films October, like a lot of people tend to want to do. You'll have significant others in your life who want to leave the room, or friends who want to suggest something you really don't want to watch again. And if they haven't seen this, make sure they see it. If you know filmmakers, young filmmakers, or even old filmmakers who are toiling in this genre and what you've never seen, The Changeling, show it to them. Because it is a film that doesn't date, rather it ages very well. It's the power of the cinema, the simplicity, almost every effect is simple. I was just thinking, we were talking about the simplicity of the filmmaking. Even that coin coming up out of the ground is just then pulled it back up by running it backwards, and the power of simple filmmaking. So watch it, or have someone else watch it.
Thank you, Stephen. This is. I was surprised to your point, John Kitley, when you finish with the credits, the rated R symbol comes up, and I was like, "This movie's rated R." And I mean, yes, you have the death of a child that's depicted on screen, but other than that, it does feel like the family can handle. And it does operate on different levels. So, the older viewers are going to get something different than the younger viewers. But it is a film, to all of your point, that we included in our book Hidden Horror because it just doesn't seem to get talked about the way that you would think, considering everybody who sees it holds it in such high esteem. But I think it just doesn't get the same kind of endurance. It doesn't keep getting mentioned. They have the best haunted house movies. It shows up. So I'm not sure what the mystery is there, but I do hope everybody checks it out. And hats off to 45 years of The Changeling. And thank you all so much for an amazing conversation. Looking forward to having you all on again very soon. Stephen, thank you for coming in for your first time. I hope we get you back again.
Absolutely.
And until next time, keep searching, keep exploring, and keep sharing the scare.